Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. Tonight is all about how to plan kind of a more long duration trip, and we're going to go through the Oregon Backcountry Discovery Route, the new one, as an example. And my goal tonight is you guys should be equipped and ready to rock and roll to go do this trip after the snow melts, which who knows when that's going to be. But anyway, my name's Chris. I gave you guys a checklist. I mentioned it earlier, but I gave you guys a checklist. That's a great vehicle checklist. We'll kind of touch on it here in a little bit. And then also, if you do have the Backcountry Discovery Route map, I will be referencing that as well. So, all right. First, I'm going to talk about kind of the logistics side of planning a trip. And with the Oregon Backcountry Discovery Route, and any of these other backcountry discovery routes. And I'm using these as an example real quick because it's a great, easy way to kind of get started into this whole thing because they've done all of the hard work for you. All of like the figuring out where the heck to go and what to see and mileage and distance and all that, it's all here. So great way to get started and great way to see the backcountry of pretty much any state west of the Rockies. They have some east side of the country as well. But anyway, so on the map, on the bottom of the map here, they've got a nice scale, a nice graph that basically shows you where fuel stops are and given distance in between each section of the route. So very, very helpful, handy thing to kind of know, right? So logistics is all about, you know, keeping the vehicle mobile, keeping people and plans and things supplied. So let's talk about sort of the first thing to consider, and that's going to be, you know, how many days are you actually setting aside to do this kind of a trip? As you do more backcountry exploring, you'll kind of get a good sense of sort of your speed of travel, especially when you're doing four-wheel drive all day long. You'll have a good sense of how many miles that you are comfortable driving. And I can tell you that that's going to be different for every one of us in this room. Some people can just slog it for 8-10 hours, and some of us just want to explore and do a little bit of driving and stop and rest and relax. So it's however you want to spend your vacation time is how you should plan for a number of days to do a trip. I would say don't worry so much about getting from start to finish on one of these things, because along the way you might find a place or something that's just absolutely gorgeous and stunning that you just may want to stay and hang out because you're like, you know what, we're on vacation. Why am I driving so much? So, but hopefully you enjoy the driving part because it's also really fun and you get to cover a lot of ground. So figure out the duration that you're comfortable traveling. Typically, on average, you can easily do a section per day on one of these trips. And this is a 7-section route. A lot of it's going to be dependent on road conditions, dependent on where you want to stay and how you want to conduct your camping, or if you're going to stay at a hotel or a campground or whatever, that can kind of change it. And I would always add a bit of padding for some unexpected surprises in your timeline, right? Because you may get a pop tire, you may have some kind of mechanical issue with the vehicle, you may get to a spot that you wanted to camp at and there's no place to camp because it's full or it's gone or there was a forest fire or whatever. So many variables. So give yourself some extra time. So if you're like, okay, I'm going to take a week off of work. I know this is a 7-section route, and after studying the map, there's actually, you kind of figure out, well, I could probably do it in 5 days, which is kind of what I think. This could be a 5-day trip, but I would maybe add a day for a contingency, just for the timeline. All right. So next, let's talk about how many people that are going to be on this trip and vehicles. So with any kind of backcountry discovery route, the route is very straightforward. They're all four-wheel drive friendly, even though it's all dual sport motorcycles, adventure bikes on these things. All these roads are on public roads. None of them are single track trails that are just OHV. They're all public trails. So it's awesome that the adventure bike folks are putting all this work into doing this, and us 4x4 folks can enjoy it, but just be aware that there are going to be a lot of two-wheeled vehicles out there, so you don't want to ruin their day. So figure out how many people, how many vehicles are going to be in your party. I'm a big fan of the buddy system, both in people and in vehicles. So if you can find another family or friends that also have a four-wheel drive that want to tag along, it's just good to have redundancy, because if one vehicle has a catastrophic mechanical failure, you still got another vehicle to help deal with problems. And the other thing is it helps you spread the load across multiple vehicles. So this monstrosity of a checklist I gave you, one vehicle can have some things and another vehicle can have other things, right? So you don't have to worry about absolutely every little thing on the list. So let's just, for an example, we'll just say this is gonna be a 2-vehicle trip. We've got 2 couples in each of 2 vehicles. So now we know our distances that we need to travel to do this whole route. We know that based on the map here, that they're saying the longest section in between fuel stops, let's just call it a nice even 150 miles. It's 149.3. So 150 miles, and you're thinking, wow, that's not very much. My car gets 300 miles per tank of gas. This is 150 miles off-road with your vehicle probably in 4-wheel drive. So you're gonna be burning a lot more gas, a lot more fuel. You're also gonna be carrying a lot more stuff. So 150 miles gets eaten up in the gas tank really, really fast. But with all the planning that you've done, you can see that they're showing a fuel stop in this town here and then this town here. So Denio, you've got a fuel stop. Fields, possibly a fuel stop. Town of Plush, you got a fuel stop. But really it's from start to finish, 150 miles is the longest section. So part of logistics is we need to understand, okay, we need to have enough fuel between both of these vehicles to keep them moving and get through fuel stops. I've been to Denio and I have been denied fuel because they were just not there that day and they closed the whole place down. They were gone fishing or something. So those are things that I like to plan for. It was a little frustrating, but the vehicle I was traveling with, we both had an extra fuel can. So we both had 5 gallons of extra fuel that really was the only way that we actually made it to our next destination, to the next fuel stop. We came in on fumes with the extra fuel cans being used. So just because it says there's a gas station there, in some of these little towns, that gas station could have been gone fishing sign in the window. And you're just like, great, there's no fuel. If you're running a diesel vehicle, not all these places are gonna have diesel. So plan for that as well. You can always look these little gas stations up, give them a call. Hey, do you guys normally sell diesel? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So just plan for that. So carry fuel. Everybody should have a gas can in their truck, in their vehicle, or on the vehicle somewhere. I recommend having at least a 5-gallon gas can on the vehicle. And that's your sort of lifeboat. We know that the longest distance between stops is 150 miles, and let's just say that off-road your vehicle can easily do 200 miles. On the street, probably 300. These are just easy round numbers. But so you know that, okay, I can, on a good day with no issues, I can do 200 miles on the trail or on 1 tank of gas, not necessarily in one day. 200 miles before I need to refill. I've got a full tank, and I've got an extra 5 gallons, which is going to buy me another 50 miles. So you've got about a 100-mile buffer with a full tank plus an extra 5 gallons. And I know it sounds crazy, but sometimes these little places, their power is not very reliable, or their data connection is not very reliable, or they just forgot to pay the credit card bill or the Visa bill for the Visa reader, and they can't take cards that day, or they just don't feel like processing cards because the person doesn't want to run the books that day. So have cash, bring cash. Always good to have. I keep $500, as like emergency, and try to have it broken up into different cuts. So don't just bring 5 $100 bills. Bring some smaller bills so you can break that up. But plan for that in your logistics side of things. I do want to just throw out a little note of consider the season that you're going. This route has some really high elevations, and so that's another nice thing about the graph on the bottom is it does give you max elevation chart for the distance that you're traveling. So you can see that you're going to get up to some spots that are 7,000 feet in elevation and whatnot. So Oftentimes, a lot of these mountain passes are not cleared of snow until at least the 4th of July. So plan for that if you're going to try to do it in June. Just think of the year that we've just had, the winter that we've just had. It's a heavy, hard winter. We had a lot of snow. We'll probably still get some more snow. So it could be a long time before the melt truly gets all the way through. I did mention it earlier off camera, but I'll mention it again. So this is a brand new route. A lot of the trails are going to be narrower and a little bit brushy because they haven't been used very much. There's some sections that are quite narrow. So, if you wait to be, doing this a little bit later in the season, there'll be other folks that have gone through and hopefully done a little trimming and knocked some of the branches down for you. So that's part of the fun. It's part of the adventure. You take these, what some people would consider a catastrophe, take it in stride and think of it as, oh, cool, I get to do some problem solving, something different, something unexpected. Makes you live a little. That's always fun. All right, I'm just gonna kind of finish the logistics here so we can get into some more fun stuff. So we wanna do our distance calculations for fuel, use the information on the map. I keep hitting on that, but so important because fuel is part of your mobility plan, keeping that vehicle functional. Next is water. We gotta calculate water needs, water carrying capacity, and water refilling options. So there's a good sort of basic rule is at the very minimum you should have a gallon of water per person per day, and that's just for general cooking and eating and drinking. That does not include showering or bathing the person. That's just for like doing a bit of dishes, filling up your water bottle several times a day, cooking some food. Right? Gallon per person per day at a minimum. If it's summertime, double it. 2 gallons per person per day. And then I would add another 20 to 25% contingency on top of that for your carrying capacity. So you're thinking, okay, I only have a couple 5-gallon, water jugs. So I got 10 gallons and there's 2 of us. So let's say it's a hot summer day. I mean, that's 2 gallons per person per day. So 4 gallons of water potentially per day for a hot climate. That's basically one of the 5-gallon jugs, let's just say per day, and you're only carrying 2 of those. So in 2 days, worst case scenario, you could be out of water. So it's good we got to plan for that. So one thing I like to do is, back to my map, is I'll go through each section and I'll take note of any water features that are on that. And I'll plan to have some kind of water filtration system. It could be as simple as just some iodine tablets that you're gonna just fill up in a pond or lake or whatever, boil some water, let it cool off or whatever, and or put some iodine in it, whatever, or you have a pump or some kind of filtration system to process that water. Because you don't know what animal just pooped in that water source, and you don't wanna drink that because it'll give you bad things. So I'll mark on this map, I'll often mark, if you guys attended my last mapping and GPS class, one thing I like to do is I'll transcribe this route to one of those, DeLorme atlases. I think Garmin owns them now, so I don't know what's on them anymore. But I'll make note of creeks, streams, springs. Down in Southeast Oregon, it's a lot drier climate, so you really want to kind of pay attention to where those features are going to be, because those are your refill sources. And also pay attention to, if I'm going through a little town or something, oftentimes in little rural towns, if it's a town that's big enough to have some kind of city municipal building or a waterworks, they often will have a city water tap outside of their city water building that's public, free water for people to refill out of. I'll use Christmas Valley as a good example. Christmas Valley is an incredibly small, tiny little town, a town that you will go through on this route, a town where the city hall and all the other city services are in a single wide trailer, including the city public works. On the outside of the single wide trailer is a spigot of fresh water, and it's just free water. So we use that all the time to fill up our water tanks, our water jugs, water bottles, splash bath, whatever. Just so plan for water. And like I said, if it's a hot time of year, like dead of summer, end of July, August, in the hotter portions, 2 gallons per person per day. So if it's 2 of you, that's basically a 5-gallon water jug that you should be going through. If you're not, you're probably getting a little dehydrated. but going through per day. Obviously, you can supplement that if you bring things like some Gatorades or some other beverages of your choice. But and then it's a long trip. It's a week-long trip. Do plan to hopefully shower or swim or take care of yourself a little bit so the rest of the traveling folks don't avoid you more. So if you do want to do some showering, if you do have a shower in your camp setup, like one of our little portable showers, or in a trailer, if the trailer has a shower, or if you just want to get a tub of water and do a washcloth spit bath, just plan to have some extra water for that. So I like to have a 20 to 25% buffer on my water supply over what I calculate. So I bring more. And then I just plan where my refill stops are going to be. And I try to plan it out to where it's convenient, it's on the route. I don't want to have to take too many deviations if I don't need to. So that's water. The other thing on logistics that's really important is, so the other piece of logistics I want to cover is your overnight spots. A lot of these backcountry discovery routes, you can kind of travel two different ways. You can do the full dispersed camping experience, which is a lot of fun. And if you have the right tools and the right comfort level, that's a fantastic way to experience these. But a lot of these little towns do have like little campgrounds or little RV parks or little motels. So, if you're feeling like you just like to have a nice bed to sleep in one night, you're on vacation, do it. It's fun. Why not? Give these towns a little bit of money, stay in their crappy little hotel. Hopefully you don't get bed bugs. But, it's part of the adventure.
You're really selling it.
I have stayed in the, what's it called in Christmas Valley? It's the Christmas Valley Inn, or like whatever it is. It's actually a great little place to stay. The rooms are clean. There's no bed bugs. At least when I was there weren't. It was actually a really nice little place to stay. Yeah, so you do want to try to have some kind of plan, game plan of, if we're going to camp X number of nights versus maybe midway through the trip, we'll treat ourselves to a hotel or go to that hot springs or whatever. That's part of your logistics plan. It's part of it's going to affect, what you guys are bringing for supplies, for food, for sleeping arrangements, all that kind of thing. But be flexible. Again, if you're cruising along and a spot that you looked on the map looked promising for a camp, and you get there and it's just horrible, or it's like the conditions are horrible, i.e. it's just howling wind all night long. You don't want to camp there. It's going to be horrible. Your tent's going to be blowing around. Your truck's going to be all over the place. Food's blowing everywhere. It's just going to be miserable, and you won't be able to have a fire or anything. So be flexible to just pivot if the conditions and the time and whatever just don't pan out. It's sometimes, there's been times where we thought we were going to camp in a spot and it was full, or the conditions were horrible, and we ended up scrambling to find another spot to camp, and that other spot that we found was actually better. So sometimes you can find some happy accidents, and it's a lot of fun. But I will say, have at least some kind of outlined itinerary of where you want to try to camp, just so you have something to shoot for. Last little thing on logistics, then we'll move on. One thing I harp on all the time, and I'll say it at the end, I'll say it now, is on one of these trips, just slow things down. Don't try to do too much during the entire trip. Don't just try to, right foot down and hammer to the end. Take the little side trips, the little explorations, drive up to that little peak and enjoy the view, go down to those little ice caves, or, peel off into that little town because there's a good little greasy spoon burger joint. Do those kind of fun things, because that makes you experience that whole area that you're driving through a lot more. One thing I love doing is finding hot springs. I love finding hot springs. So I'll comb the maps and look around to see if I'm even within a few miles of any hot springs, and I'll make those as little side stops, because it's just so refreshing after a day of driving or whatever to soak in some hot springs. Unless it's like 100 degrees out, then probably not refreshing. But then you would find a creek or a river to splash in. That's always fun. So plan for some little fun side trips and give yourself some time for that. And again, don't try to bite off so much in a day. If you come across a spot that's just an awesome, epic place to camp, and you just want to take time there, stay another night there. You're on vacation. Enjoy it. We're not on an expedition. We're on a vacation. So many people get this expedition thing in their mind, and it's like, what are we expeditioning? Are we discovering the new world? Or it's like we're just following a trip on a vacation. Like, treat it as a vacation, not a mission, okay? Promise me that. Yes? It's a vacation. It's not an expedition. Okay, next. Let's talk about vehicle prep and the vehicle mobility plan. So, first thing I want to talk about when it comes to the vehicle is the vehicle. Think of the vehicle, if any of you have ever done any backpacking, think of the vehicle as your backpack. That vehicle is your backcountry backpack. It's your four-wheel drive backpack. You want that backpack to function and to work. So if you're planning a trip like this in the backcountry, what a great opportunity to just do a full inspection of the vehicle, make sure everything's ship-shape, because little things that are kind of like a thing, it's like, I've been putting it off. I know that tie rod boot's been leaking a little bit, but no big deal because I'm in town. If something happens, whatever, I'm 10 minutes away from an auto parts store, no big deal. If you're out in the middle of, if you're out in the town of Denio, nobody's gonna have a ball joint for a Jeep Wrangler or a Toyota pickup. It's not gonna happen. So if you blow a ball joint out, that just shuts down your entire trip. So do the preventative maintenance. A couple weeks before the trip, what I like to do is I'll go through the entire vehicle, and this sounds super nerdy and very excessive, and it is, and you should do it. So I'll go through the entire vehicle, make sure all the systems are functioning and working properly. And I'm talking about everything from the drivetrain, engine, climate control, and also includes systems from accessories that you've added on the vehicle. So let's say you put a bumper and a winch on there. Run the winch, pull the line out, inspect the winch line, winch it back in, just make sure the winch is functioning, give it a good test, make sure all of your off-road lights are working. I know it sounds crazy, but again, little problems now or things that you don't necessarily know are there, that's the time to discover it when it's in your driveway. You could also take it to four-wheel drive shops. I think we do vehicle inspections as well here. So if it's something that you just don't have the time to do or don't necessarily think like, man, I don't know what to even look for, take it to a reputable four-wheel drive shop. Heck, you could even just take your vehicle to whatever shop normally does your service and just have them do a service, have them do an inspection, have them test your battery, make sure that your vehicle starting battery passes a load test. It's always good because the last thing you want is a battery to go flat on you out in the middle of nowhere. If you've got aftermarket 12-volt system in your vehicle to run your fridge or any of that kind of stuff, make sure that's all good to go. Make sure there's no frayed wiring anywhere. The more thorough you are with a vehicle inspection, the more peace of mind you'll have that thing should work properly, and you'll lessen the potential of having surprises. So service the vehicle. If you're like, well, I still have 1,000 miles till an oil change, just get the oil change. Just go do an oil change. That way the vehicle's fresh. It's got a fresh oil in it, fresh air filter. It's good to go because in the backcountry, you're going to be putting it through some harder conditions rather than just driving it to work every day. So give the vehicle its best chance to be successful. The other thing is, this is so good to do. It's very good to do right before a big trip, and that is unload the truck. Open it up, empty all the drawers, empty absolutely everything out. Take an inventory of what's in your truck because you will be shocked about finding things that you're like, wow, I didn't realize I had a pair of those, or I've been looking for that, or wow, where's my flashlight that's supposed to be in that door pocket? It's not here. Right? So do that inventory because you'll think you have something in your truck and it ain't there. You'll be expecting something that's in the vehicle that should be functioning and it's broken or it's out of batteries, or you're just like, oh, it's all moldy and what is this sticky stuff that gooped over? It's just like, do that inventory. So it's a good thing to start with a good base on a long trip. Do an inventory, refresh and refill the things that are spent. In my vehicle for my kiddos, on my back seat, I have a seat pouch organizer that's full of all kinds of little snacks and batteries and things for the kiddos that they can get to in the back seat. I empty that whole thing out because I'll find half-eaten bags of fruit snacks. I'll find used batteries put back into the new battery holder. I'll find all kinds of nonsense. So do that inventory so that everything's fresh and full and ready to rock and roll. just do it. It's good discipline. I know it's a pain, but on a nasty, not today, it's beautiful, but on a gross weekend, just open the vehicle up in the garage, or on a nice weekend, open it out in the driveway and just have that discipline to go do it and refill, restock, and also remove stuff that you just haven't used. You'll open the truck up and you'll be like, why do I have a set of tire chains in here when it's, August? Get rid of the tire chains. You're not going anywhere where there's snow in August in Oregon, hopefully. But things like that, where you're just like, I don't need to drag that around, don't need it, or whatever. Okay, all good on that? The vehicle is your backpack. Give it its best chance of success. Take care of that backpack. It's your mobile lifeline. All right. Now, I mentioned it briefly in the beginning, but let's kind of go through. You guys should all have this list on your chair. I want to kind of cover some of the things on here. Does everybody have one of these? If you don't, I've got extras. Hopefully you guys all have them. All right. So, again, I didn't make this list. This is Chris Collard put this list together. I won't go into who he is, but he's a very well-renowned, well-respected, very experienced person in the backcountry when it comes to vehicles and mobility. So he put together this list. I I changed some things slightly, but I want to kind of go through it and just kind of explain some reasoning behind some stuff. So because you may have questions. So I'll start out with, this is a worst case scenario. I'm have to be self-reliant. I'm the only vehicle in my convoy, whatever, right? So this is a overly extensive list. So don't think you have to have absolutely everything in here. But let's start on the top left. We'll start with recovery gear. This is a good basic recovery kit if you have a winch. If you don't have a winch, a lot of these things aren't going to be useful at all. However, a kinetic strap is a good strap to have when you don't have a winch. Gloves, absolutely good to have. You want to protect your hands, keep these things functioning. These are tools. The pull pal or pull all, or there's a billion other different names to call it. That's basically a portable ground anchor. Not really useful without a winch. It's kind of nice to use that with a winch, but I would certainly say recovery boards and kinetic straps. If you don't have a winch, at least have those items in your truck, as well as a shovel. You can do a lot of good damage with those basic tools, getting yourself out of a stuck scenario. So a good set of recovery boards, a good shovel, and a kinetic strap, especially if you're, obviously if you're traveling with another vehicle, definitely a kinetic strap. But then all the other things are going to be accessories that are going to go with a winch. And the winch line extension, a lot of people don't think about that. But I'll use a good example. There was a time where we were out, this was northeast of Christmas Valley, just to keep you kind of, give you a context of where we're at. So we're just out in the high country. It's high desert with sagebrush everywhere. There isn't a single thing that you could tie or anchor a winch line to pull yourself out. We were going down this road, beautiful day, didn't think much of it, and this was a while back, but there was a section of the little trail that had some, it was a little muddy, little mud hole. We walked up to it, couldn't really see the bottom. We know that we should have tested the bottom with a stick or something. Didn't have a stick. We were lazy, and we just drove through it. First truck goes through it and gets about halfway through this mud puddle and just stops. And is just instantly buried to its axles. And that's the lead vehicle. That little mud puddle and that soil out there, when it got wet, just turns into this goo that just sucks you in. And that truck was stuck. Well, he's the lead vehicle. There's nothing in front of him or around anywhere that's bigger than a little sage bush. So thankfully there's a vehicle behind, but we had to, do a little creative extraction to get that vehicle unstuck out in the middle of nowhere. He was far enough into the vehicle where he's far enough into the vehicle and stuck enough where after a bunch of digging and with recovery boards, we had to do a double line pull, actually a triple line pull from the vehicle behind I won't go into the details of what that rigging is, but it's just gave us some mechanical advantage because he was so buried, but we ran out of winch line length. Thankfully, we had a winch line extension, and that was the only way we got that vehicle out without having to camp there for 3 days and dig and dig and dig and dig for 3 days straight. So having a winch line extension, you think 90 to 100 feet of winch line on your winch is going to be enough. There's times where it is not enough when you're out in the middle of nowhere. So good thing to have. It's cheap insurance. It's a heck of a lot cheaper than calling an off-road tow truck to come find you out in the middle of nowhere, because they'll just laugh and say, good luck, or they'll give you a nice $2,000 bill. Recovery gear, pretty straightforward there. Again, you don't have to have everything. If you don't have a winch, half of that list is pointless to you. But if another vehicle in the convoy has a winch, I don't know, maybe ask your buddy, hey, do you by chance have a couple of these things? Because we may want to consider it. Because I don't have a winch and you do. And, encourage your buddy to do their vehicle inspection, check their winch before the trip and make sure their winch is functioning. Because you don't want to rely on a winch that nobody's run since last summer. And it's just sat on that truck all winter long. All right, tire repair. Flats are just going to happen. When you're out in the backcountry, you're going to get a flat tire at some point. It's not if, it's when. So have a full-size spare at a minimum, because that's again just an easy way to fix the problems. And then also have a tire repair kit. Something as basic and simple as this that just sits underneath the seat or in the drawer or just kind of buried away somewhere. Have a way to fix and repair tires. This is for just basic plugs. There's a great company called Glue Tread, and they sell these tire sidewall repair kits. So if you get a cut sidewall on a tire, you could stuff all the little bacon strips in it that you want, and you're never going to plug it. So their sidewall repair kits have big patches. You can even stitch up a sidewall with some baling wire, then put some of their patches on, and you can get yourself out of a bad situation. But Glue Tread, get one of their tire repair kits, keep it in your kind of recovery cubby or whatever you have, but have a way to keep those tires functioning. At a minimum, when you're in the backcountry, have a way to air your tires down, because you're going to want to let some pressures out as you're on rougher and rougher terrain or softer terrain. Let some tire pressure out, just to give your truck better traction, you better ride quality. But then when you get to a highway section, have a portable air compressor to air that tire back to highway pressures. You'd be shocked how much adjusting tire pressure does for traction. It's all about tire pressure for traction and flotation. I have a good video on basic vehicle recovery, and I kind of go on a little spiel on tires. So give that a watch if you guys want. But airing down and then airing your tires back up, just being able to adjust and modulate air pressures depending on the conditions, absolute game changer. And also, if you're just on rough terrain, on a rough washboard road, knock those tire pressures down, and that'll just help smooth the ride out. And you won't have that yes, right? I mean, the washboard can be horrendous in some of these places. So yeah, knock the tire pressures down. And that's going to be different for every truck, every vehicle weight, et cetera. But that's tire repair. There's whole classes on tire repair. We won't go down that road. Next is the spare parts punch list, and this kind of bleeds over to the top of the right column. Now, this is going to be completely determined by your vehicle, the state of your vehicle. If it's a brand new vehicle versus an older classic vehicle, there's going to be more or less spares that you should keep. There's also things that can just get broken on the trail. Even with a brand new truck, there's just stuff that can break from you bumping into a rock or hitting a big hole or whatever. Tie rods are a great example. If you've got independent front suspension, a lot of like a Ram or a lot of these full-size 1500 class trucks or SUVs, tie rods can get bent pretty easily. So it's good to have a spare tie rod. If your vehicle uses the same tie rod on both sides, then awesome. You only need to carry one. Spare tie rod's really small, easy to squirrel away into a kit somewhere. Not a big thing. But I also recommend a spare belt, because it's really easy to throw a belt on a vehicle. Just some good basics. Things like drive lines, special, clutch and brake slave cylinder kits. I mean, if you're out in the middle of nowhere for a long, long time, you want to have as much spare parts as you can. But doing something like this route for the Oregon BDR, just get some of the very basics. Some just replacement hoses, extra fluids, spare fluids, right, for everything in the vehicle, motor oil, gear oil, some ATF if your vehicle uses ATF, some coolant, just brake fluid, all those kind of things. Ways to fix leaks if something starts leaking. So you may want to bring some JB Weld or some kind of epoxy that's rated for certain things. I always like to carry back to the hoses, like I said, a spare radiator hose, some spare vacuum hose, some spare fuel line, because you can fix a lot of things with that. You can determine if your truck takes CVs in the front. If you're kind of going into some nasty places, a spare CV is kind of nice. On the Oregon BDR, there's no trail that's really nasty where I think you'd blow a CV. But during your vehicle inspection, if you know that you've got 250,000 miles on the stock CVs, you've probably got some brittle, tired old CV boots that are going to start weeping and leaking on you. Service those. Do it before the trip, because replacing a CV axle on a muddy, dirty trail when it's pouring down rain is not fun to do, and that's not what you want to do on your vacation. So do it here. They list out like thermostat, wheel bearings, water. I mean, if you've got an old classic truck, like an old Land Rover or an old Jeep or some old classic vehicle, you may want to carry some of those things. Obviously, most modern vehicles, you shouldn't have a distributor cap, so ignore that. But if you have a classic truck, yeah, good cap and rotor. I've been out in the middle of nowhere on an old vehicle that had a distributor cap and rotor, and the rotor decided to go flying and bounce around inside the cap, and then it was no more. I did have a spare rotor and a spare cap because it just chewed everything up, but that did save my day once. Anyway, that spare parts list, you're going to have to kind of use some judgment on that one. All right, consult with your mechanic if you got a handy buddy. Or if you're just one of those handy persons that knows the state of your vehicle, you can kind of adjust that spare kit. This is not all people, but in my immediate family, I am much more mechanically inclined than my spouse is, and that's fine. But I still have her help with some of the basic vehicle inspection, because if I'm hurt and she needs to fix something, I can talk her through something, but if she already has a good basic mechanical understanding of what goes where and how, tools and things, what a great learning opportunity, and what just a great level of redundancy. Make sure that everybody in your party knows how to change a tire. Because again, you could slip and fall and break your arm, or you could get really sick because you didn't clean your water that you pumped out of that cow poop pond, or whatever. There could be tons of bad things that can happen really, really fast, and you want to make sure that everybody can contribute to keep the vehicle functioning. And some of you folks that are not mechanically inclined, don't worry. You don't need to become a mechanic. Just know your vehicle, and that just comes with just tinkering with it. And if you have a significant other that's very tinkery and very handy and does know the vehicle, spend some time together. I know it's painful, but do it. Spend some time together and just go through that vehicle together, and then it's just good for everybody to know. Same thing with first aid. Both of you should know how to use the first aid kit and everything in there. Because if I get hurt, I want her to be able to know how to fix me, and vice versa. She's like, you better know how to fix me if she gets hurt, right? So same thing, right? So anyway, thank you for reminding me for that. That was very helpful. All right, enough of the spare parts. This is, like I said, very extensive. Basic toolkit. This is what I would call, they say basic. This is a pretty significant toolkit. Your toolkit that you bring is going to be entirely dependent on your vehicle, and also dependent on the vehicles that you're traveling with. My vehicle is a Toyota. There's not a single SAE bolt, nut, anything on there, so I do not bring any SAE nuts and bolts. And everybody I travel with, most of the people I travel with, usually on trips, have vehicles that have a lot of metric on it. In fact, most American-made vehicles are metric nuts and bolts nowadays. If you have a vehicle that was made within the last probably 5 years, We just got a new company ram the other day for our business. That thing's mostly metric. I mean, almost all bolts and nuts on it are metric. So your toolkit should reflect your vehicle, and you're only going to know that by screwing around with your vehicle. You should always have a good basic toolkit. Again, that's going to be entirely dependent on your vehicle and what your capabilities are. If you don't know how to do some significant repairs on your vehicle, then having certain tools are going to be kind of pointless. But have some good basic tools to change things that could prevent the vehicle from going forward and getting you out to at least a piece of pavement. So think of things that are moving and rolling and drivetrain related, tire related, wheel related. You can get a long ways with a roof rack falling off and duct tape to the side of the vehicle, or headlights broken and accessories rattling off, but you can't get too far with, your drivetrain malfunctioning. So I carry a whole little, just like a basic like tackle box, not a box, but like one of those little single layer tackle box divider things with all kinds of nuts and bolts. I carry a spare oil drain plug, spare differential plugs, spare spark plugs is always good. And then, all of your suspension components, you should have spare nuts and bolts for. I even got so nerdy to the point where I got some spare relays and spare fuses that are critical to keeping the vehicle running. So, main ignition relay, main fuel relay. I have a Toyota, so I'll probably never use those, but you just never know. You never know if you go through a puddle too hot and you fried something. But there's, another fun nut and bolt story, side tangent. We were driving 2 show vehicles out to Overland Expo West a couple years back. We were bringing out a 200 series Land Cruiser and a Ford Ranger that we had at the time. And I threw in my toolkit, which also had my spare nuts and bolts in it. And it just so happens that I was in the rear vehicle and I was following our Land Cruiser. And we're driving along and we were out on 84. We had just gone past, North Powder on our way out to Ontario, kind of out there ways, way past any Toyota dealership. And I see what I thought were some pretty big bolts all of a sudden come flying at my windshield in the Ranger behind the Land Cruiser. I'm like, so I got on the radio and I said, hey, either you ran over something or your truck just threw some bolts. Let's just pull over and just give it a good look, see, before things become an issue. We pulled over. Nothing was rattling. They didn't feel anything weird, but we immediately pulled over. And I'm crawling around underneath, and both rear shock bolts, for the rear shocks, the bottom bolts that hold the rear shocks to the axle, were just not there anymore. They're along 84 somewhere. And so that was fun, and we still had another day and a half to drive to get to Flagstaff, Arizona, to get to a trade show, which was kind of mission critical for us. Thankfully, I had my spare nuts and bolts, and I found that I had my Toyota 4Runner bolt kit in there, and my 4Runner lower shock bolts for the rear shocks are the same exact ones that the 200 series uses. Thank you, Toyota, for using the same parts. And to this day, that Land Cruiser still has 4Runner lower shock bolts. But there was a time where we came across somebody on a trail in an old 80 series Land Cruiser, and he had a brake caliper bolt that just came off, and his brake caliper came off and was flopping around, and he had it kind of monkey wired up. But I had some spare bolts, and we found a bolt that was the perfect one that got his brake caliper on. So you can always have spares that you can lend to somebody else. That guy, he offered me like $20. I'm like, don't worry about it. Hopefully he'll pay it forward to the next person. So absolutely, some spare nuts and bolts. Make sure they're nuts and bolts. Don't just go down to the hardware store and just start buying nuts and bolts. Don't just empty your garage of nuts and bolts, but make sure you have nuts and bolts that you know what they are going to, because the last thing you want to be doing is fiddle farting around with a bunch of random hardware that doesn't even fit your truck, because you found out that all the hardware in your nut and bolts can is all SAE and your truck's all metric, or vice versa. So with spares, be deliberate. Jump online and search Toyota 4Runner lower shock bolts. Get a couple of them if you have a 4Runner, obviously. Drivetrain bolts, suspension bolts. Just then you know what they are, and then you can get super nerdy, and with your little high-speed tackle box like I have, I actually took a labeler and I labeled each little compartment. So I know these are suspension bolts, these are brake related, these are engine related, and just have some organization, because then you're not wasting your vacation fixing your truck and searching for nuts and bolts. It's all labeled, it's all ready to go. I know it sounds crazy, but time savers. I've used my winch to straighten out a tie rod on another vehicle because he didn't have a spare tie rod. I was like, well, the one you have is still attached. It's already ruined. Let's see if we can get it somewhat straight so your steering wheel's not like this. And with the winch and the tree strap wrapped around the tie rod and just kind of nice, slow, steady, easy little pulls in the winch, we bent that tie rod to darn near perfect. And continued the whole trip. It was like day 2 on that trip, and we went another 5 days, and we were good. So your winch can be a good tool. It's great for straightening out tie rods or track bars or panhard rods or whatever. It's a tool. Sometimes you got to get creative. There's lots more stuff in here. Have some basic 12-volt wiring, couple just extra bits of wire, some connectors, some electrical tape, some crimpers, some strippers, just some basic wiring just in case if something gets funky and you need to rewire something. Have a multimeter. A multimeter is a great tool to diagnose electrical gremlins. Should you have one out in the trail, make sure you watch a YouTube video to learn how to use a multimeter. If you don't know how, you can get a multimeter from Harbor Freight for $5, and the stupid thing will work long enough for you to do what you need to do. But just a good basic toolkit with some good basic tools in there to deal with things in your truck. I do carry some basic kind of service fluids. I'll carry a little PB blaster or a little bottle of WD-40, and just some little some NICs is a nice tool to have. Even some Loctite. If you got a bolt that's just not staying put and it constantly is backing off on you, put some Loctite on that sucker, lock it down, that'll at least get you home. So I won't go through the tools one by one because, again, it's so specific to your vehicle. I'm happy to chat with you afterwards. If you've got additional 12-volt accessories, carry spare fuses for that. So I have a dual battery system in my vehicle, which has a big 100-amp fuse in it to carry that. There was one time where I popped that 100-amp fuse. I don't even know how it happened, but I had a spare, and that kept my fridge running the entire trip. If you've got radios and stuff installed in your vehicle, those are all going to have fuses. Have spare fuses. Every vehicle should have spare fuses. If you, part of your vehicle inspection, if you realize that you replaced a fuse a while back, most fuse boxes on vehicles have provision for extra fuses in the actual fuse box. Make sure that's full with spares that it should be. And you're right, get good fuses. Don't try to cheap out on absolutely everything. Get good stuff, because a good thing is going to be a reliable thing most of the time, hopefully. All right, let's keep moving on. I have a lot more to cover here, and we just want to hustle. So fluids, we talked about that. Just make sure you have spare fluids. I also like to pack in some just work gloves, some nitrile gloves in my toolkit, also in my first aid kit. But again, your hands are a tool. Don't try to be a hero and just be Mr. Grubby and because if you get some nasty chemicals on your hands, vehicle chemicals, and you're not washing your hands as often as you should, and you eat and you ingest some of that, it can make you sick. And then you're barfing your brains out on vacation, and that's not fun. So just put some gloves on. Just take care of your hands. Your hands are good tools. You want to keep them functioning and nice. Then he's got this backcountry punch list, and this is just sort of things that are nice to have. Some of these things won't necessarily be in a toolkit, but these are just kind of things that are nice to have in a vehicle. You should have a fire extinguisher in your vehicle. Make sure it's a fire extinguisher that's the right chemical compound for general purpose fires around vehicles. There's great research you can do online to figure out what type of extinguisher you need. Jumper cables, just all these kind of basic things. They've got, if you have a high lift jack, make sure you have all the things with it. Make sure you work the high lift jack before you go out on your trip. Make sure it functions, you know how to use it. Axe, shovel, saw, it's good to have tools to cut a tree or a branch or something that's blocking a trail, or chop up some firewood. If you have questions about the rest of the list, holler afterwards. But this is just a good reference. Make your own list that makes sense to you, but this is sort of like the all-encompassing. He even had like portable welding stuff on here. I took that off because I just, most folks aren't going to have that level of skills or that equipment to bring with you, but this is just reference. Okay, let's keep moving on. We're almost there. All right. So, meal planning. Meal planning is a big one. So, figure out, obviously, the number of people you have. I would just get online and, or just get on Excel and just make just a super fancy, special, just general meal plan. List out the week, how many days you're going to be, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then just plan your meals out. And when you plan it out, you are more efficient with your food purchasing. You're more efficient with what you are carrying. And then you can be a little bit more thoughtful about what you guys are actually going to eat. And you make sure that everybody has the snacks that they like to have, the beverages they like to have. It's good to also have a basic pantry box for the truck, just to have some of those basics in there. Things like, some muffin mix, just things to just whip up something fun, your spices that you like to cook with. I always have some extra pasta, some different sauces and things I like to bring as well. It depends on the level of cooking that you like to do. But I would say this, I love to eat, and one of my favorite things to really make the camping experience fun is it's fun to cook, and it's fun to cook as a group. So when I meal plan, I meal plan meals that aren't just one person cooking. I meal plan meals that everybody gets to cook together. We all make the meal together. It's just a lot more fun. You're being social. It's just a good time to be, just to spend some time together. So unless you absolutely despise everybody in your party, then you may not want to. But so there's all kinds of different recipes and things that are out there. There's some great camp cookbooks. I've got lots of secret recipes that I'd love to share with you guys. I don't want to go in depth with that, but figure out your meals. One thing I like to do is I love, wherever I'm at, I love getting local produce or anything local when I can. I say this a lot, but one of my favorite desserts that I love to make is anytime I'm in Washington, up around Goldendale or whatever, in season they have some just fantastic peaches that are like size of softballs that they have out there, and you'll see farmer stands all over the place selling these peaches. And I love taking one of those, cutting it in half, pulling the pit out, put a little brown sugar dollop in the pit hole there, and just taking that and putting it on the fire or the grill or whatever, and just let that peach get all bubbly and gooey. And then with the fridge freezer, pull out some Tillamook vanilla ice cream, peach vanilla ice cream. That is a fantastic dessert out in the middle of nowhere. But you can only get those peaches when they're in season at the local little farm stands. So be flexible and try to get some local supplies, local things that you just normally wouldn't get to try. Like the roadside stand that's selling elk jerky. Go get some elk jerky. It's delicious. Try it. If you don't like it, no worries. But, don't think you have to buy all your groceries here at Safeway or Freddy's or Costco or whatever. They'll survive if you don't buy all your groceries for a trip. But the little mom and pop markets that are out in the middle of nowhere, you may be their only customer that day. And, if you drop $20-$40 on some groceries there, getting some fresh produce or whatever, restocking your supplies, that's, I'd rather give those family-run businesses my money when I'm traveling if I can. Unless you work for Safeway, then I apologize. Buy all your stuff at Safeway. But, you know what I mean? Just, if I owned a little family business, I'd want people to, do business with me. So, just kind of plan for that. And also, then you don't have to carry everything. If you know that you're going through a little town and you've done a little research in your planning phase of, hey, there is a little grocery store there. You maybe call them up, hey, are you still in business? Are you still there? Will you be there on this day? Okay. So like Christmas Valley, they have a little family quickie mart there that's part of the gas station, but it's actually a grocery store because it's a very small town. So go in there and buy some groceries, restock, some fresh vegetables, meats and things. That way you don't have to bring everything all at once. It makes your packing easier. It makes your meal planning kind of fun. Shameless plug, but they do have some pretty good chicken strips in there too. If you're just not feeling like cooking, their chicken strips at their little gas station, grocery store, deli counter are actually really good. Just saying. Also too, I keep going back to Christmas Valley, but you know what? Christmas Valley is on the route. Plan to eat out. You're on vacation. Go out for a meal. I have a recommendation. On this route.
Is it as good as the one you told us in February?
Yes, it is. It is Cowboy Dinner Tree. Okay. Go to Cowboy Dinner Tree. They're only open Friday, Saturday, or Thursday, Friday, Saturdays during the summer. Reservation only. You have to make your reservation probably a month in advance because you're not going to get a seat, and bring cash because it's cash only. But go out and go to Cowboy Dinner Tree if you're doing the backcountry discovery route. It's a little off your route, but what a great meal. Good family-run business, and it's just kind of fun eating good food that you didn't have to cook. And then the amount of food you get is so much that you'll have breakfast, lunch, and dinner the next day from all your leftovers, and you can make some really good stuff out of leftovers. But they only serve two things: either a 30-ish ounce whole steak, sirloin, that's like a top sirloin, or a whole rotisserie chicken, and then all the fixings. So if you're vegetarian, their salad's really good. But yeah, their steak's fantastic, and their rotisserie chicken's good, but their steak is really, really good. So plan for that as part of your meal prep. Be like, you know what, on this day, we're going to be going through that section. Let's make a reservation for Cowboy Dinner Tree. Give them some business; they'd sure love it, and you'd have a great, great dinner that you didn't have to prepare. Their dinner rolls, you walk in, that's like the first thing you smell is this pie pan of just dinner rolls that are all buttery and warm and fantastic. Oh, it's dinner time. I'm hungry. All right. So with your meal plan, obviously you got to carry the food. So think about refrigeration or an ice chest or something, a way to transport the food. If you are planning, think of things that you can maybe prep at home. If there's, I have a chili recipe for some Texas red chili. It's the official chili of the state of Texas. I'm a born Texan. I love my chili. I'll make a batch of Texas red chili, stick it in some Ziploc bags because it takes like 8 hours to make it properly, and then another 8 hours to smoke the brisket beforehand. So it just takes some time. But stuff like that, it's super easy to have that in the fridge or in the ice chest. Warm it up on the stove real quick, and you got a nice hot meal. Also plan to have a couple things that you can just warm up like that anyway as a contingency. Let's say you just got into camp super late, everybody's knackered. Last thing you want to do is open up all the kitchen and start making this whole big meal. You just want to get some food in the belly and go to bed. Worst case, have some Mountain House in there, or just some soups, or pre-make some chili or whatever it is. Just have some quick meal options. Yeah, and enjoy eating outdoors and cooking outdoors. That's part of the fun. So with the meal plan, make sure you have enough food for everybody. Make sure you plan to stop and get some local resupplies. In your route, you'll know, by studying your map, you'll know where all the little towns are. You've already done your research on where the little mom and pop stores are, so you already kind of have that, right? And you can mark it out. If you need to, make an itinerary and just write some notes that says, on this day, we're going to make sure to stop into this town and go to this little store and get XYZ. So, awesome. All right. We talked about the pantry box. Again, just, that's personal preference. Make sure you have, when you're loading your vehicle, make sure you go through all your camp kitchen stuff. Make sure you have everything. Last thing you want to do is get out there and realize you don't have that pot or that pan or that spatula or whatever you need to make your meals. Make sure you have all the supplies that you need for your cooking. Make sure you have everything you need for communications. And if you're in a two-vehicle party like we were kind of talking about in the beginning, make sure both trucks have radios so you can talk to each other. It sure is nice when you're driving with people out in the backcountry to just chit-chat with the vehicle that you're traveling with. It's just fun to chit-chat, or, oftentimes the lead vehicle will see, a pack of wild horses running in front, and the vehicle behind won't get a chance to see it, but you can say, hey, if you look real quick, they're running over there, and whatever. It's just good to have that chit-chat, telling horrible dad jokes to each other, all that kind of stuff. And then obviously, too, if you get into some places where you need to, get out and spot the other vehicle, having some radios is a nice way to communicate. So make sure you have all your navigation stuff dialed. You have your maps, your GPS, everything you need that we went through in that class. And then some of the general supplies, like I said, just ways to start a fire, have some emergency kit, have a first aid kit, make sure everybody knows how to use it, make sure everybody knows how to start a fire. Just, plan, prep, make sure everybody knows these things. It's good to take a CPR first aid class, because if I fall down and die, at least my wife can pump my chest and hopefully give me back to life. Unless she wants the life insurance, then she'll just give me the boot and call it good. But, first aid, CPR, wilderness survival class, wilderness first aid class is a great one to take as well. And just have some good first aid with you, because you're not going to have an ambulance come to you very quick if things go south. Last is just the personal kit list. I just want to talk about, we mentioned clothing earlier in the beginning. Plan for the appropriate clothing for the season that you're going to be in and the area that you're going to be in. And just be aware that the temperatures in the desert are going to be much different than the temperatures up high in the mountains. There's been times where it's been 90 degrees, and the next morning we woke up and there's 4 inches of snow on the ground, and then the next day it was 90 degrees again. That just happens in the mountains. Weather gets funky. So just be prepared. And be prepared to where you have layers. You can layer on as the temperatures are fluctuating. Always have some basic rain gear with you. Bring some long johns too. Be prepared for some cold nights sleeping, so make sure your sleeping bags or your bedding or whatever is sufficient to keep you warm and cozy. Because the last thing you want is to be, yeah, there you go. See, freezing your buns off at night. So, and I will say this: do put some effort into your sleeping arrangement. Having a good night's sleep is you're on vacation. You want a good night's sleep. Get a good night's sleep, because you're going to be seeing a lot of country. You're going to be covering a lot of ground. You want to be well rested. So make sure you've got a good pillow, a good sleeping bag if you're using sleeping bags, some good bedding if you've got a tent arrangement or a trailer or a camper set up. Just make sure that your sleeping arrangement is comfy, cozy, and also layered, so you can add blankets and things as things get cold, or peel them off and just have a sheet or something light to sleep in if it's hot. So be comfortable sleeping. If you're not comfortable sleeping and eating, and that portion is just miserable, then all of this is just pointless. Focus on human comfort first. And in fact, don't even worry about all the nonsense on the vehicle. Focus on making the people comfortable, the human comfortable. If the human is happy and comfortable, the human will want to go do it more, and then we can play around with the truck and carry all the stuff. Let's talk about packing. Just like backpacking, this is just four-wheel drive backpacking, that's all it is. But backpacking, be cognizant of weight. Weight is going to be the enemy when you're backpacking, because it's just going to wear you down. It's also going to wear your truck down. It's going to cost you more fuel. It's going to make your engine work harder, your brakes working harder. Be cognizant of weight. So be cognizant of weight distribution in the vehicle. Don't throw all your big heavy toolkits and stuff up on your roof rack, because that's a lot of weight that's up high. And when your truck's bouncing around on the road, that weight then starts swinging your truck harder and is putting a lot of stress on the roof rack, and it's going to affect the way the vehicle handles. So weight, heavy things need to be down low and as centered in between the two axles as possible. And that's also fuel and water. Think about that as well. One thing I like to do is, if we're in between fuel stops, every morning in camp, I'll either before or after breakfast, I'll go through and just quickly look at the vehicle, make sure the vehicle hasn't sprung a leak or anything. But then I'll take my gas cans and I'll just top up the fuel, because I keep my gas cans on the roof because I don't want them in the vehicle, because I don't want to be huffing fumes all day long. But I'll put the fuel from my cans in the gas tank, because now that weight's nice down and low and not on the roof. So think about load distribution in the vehicle. Make sure that everybody that's traveling in that vehicle knows where everything is. So pack together. Pack the vehicle together. So important. Pack the vehicle together. Because if somebody needs to know where that first aid kit is, and the only person that knows where it is laying bleeding out on the ground, and the other person doesn't know where the heck the thing is, and they start tearing apart the whole truck, well, you just bled out. And I know that sounds really morbid and horrible on a vacation, but stuff happens. So if everybody knows where everything is, label things, be organized, have some little totes or bins or something, and just take a piece of masking tape and some Sharpie and just label the dang thing so you know what's in them. Everybody can find them, and lash things down. Use straps, ratchets, cam straps, bungee cords. Just make sure things are secure, because when you're bouncing around on the trail and bumping around, you just don't want stuff flying off of the vehicle or flying around in the vehicle, because that's not fun. I've been in a vehicle that's rolled over. I wasn't driving, but there were radios, flashlights, all kinds of things flying past my eyes as the vehicle's rolling over. I don't know how I didn't get clocked in the head by something big and heavy, but it can happen. So something as simple as, like, let's say you have a big old mag light that you keep kind of in your door pocket. Make sure that sucker's in the door pocket or clipped in or something, because if that thing goes flying through the cab as you tumble down the hill in your truck, it's going to knock you out, and then you won't be able to climb out of the vehicle and fix the problem. So secure your stuff. I mentioned, accessing gear. Last thing I want to talk about, very last thing, let's talk about emergencies. The more planned you are, the better prepared you are. And just got to think about that you are your own little mobile city. So you need to be your own fire department. You need to be your own police department. You need to be your own ambulance. You need to be your own, tow truck service. You have to be very self-reliant when you're out in the middle of nowhere. So when you guys are looking for campsites, think of security. Try to camp close to each other. If you're camping in this area that feels sketchy, trust your gut, go somewhere else. If there's some methed out, Breaking Bad, clapped out RV trailer that was stolen and is out in the middle of the nowhere, don't go camping next to them, because they're probably not going to be the people you want to hang out with. Unless they are, then you just made some new friends. But just be smart with where you choose to camp. Be aware of your surroundings. When I get to a camp spot, set up camp and whatever, but just kind of walk around. Just see what's around you. See if just over the hill there's not a bunch of tweakers or a bunch of kids having a rave out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you'll find the weirdest stuff out in the middle of nowhere in the backcountry. It doesn't matter what state or part of the country you're in. There's just people do weird stuff, and there's weird things. Sometimes it's interesting, sometimes it's terrifying. So be cognizant of your surroundings. Plan to be smart with how you camp. There's the old term, circle the wagons. There is safety in numbers, and vehicles that are kind of camped somewhat close together, people aren't going to mess with that at 2 a.m. And have a way to deal with the two-legged problems and the four-legged problems, because you will encounter some four-legged critters out in the backcountry. So just be smart about that. Be smart about your food, your dishes, all that kind of stuff, because there's cats and bears and then two-legged critters that wear tennis shoes and sometimes missing teeth that will pose problems. So just be smart about that. I'll talk about first aid one last time. Make sure you have a significant first aid kit, not just bumps and boo-boos, but have ways to deal with broken bones and things, because it's so easy to twist an ankle. It's so easy to trip and fall. Make sure you have a way to deal with burns. It's so easy to burn yourself on a campfire, or if you're working on a truck that broke down, burn yourself on the hot exhaust manifold or something. Have a way to deal with that. Certainly deal with cuts and things. If you get a nasty cut on a hand or a finger, you don't have a way to deal with it, that can get infected and really start becoming an issue. So just make sure you have a good first aid kit. You don't have to be a full EMT out there, but have a really good first aid kit. Take some first aid course, know how to use it. Make sure everybody in your party, including your significant other that you're traveling with, knows how to use it. Unless the goal is to collect life insurance, so then don't bother. But know how to do first aid. Make sure you guys have a tourniquet. Make sure you guys have, SAM splints are great. Just great ways to splint a bone or hold something together that's busted up. But yeah, tourniquets are good because you could trip and fall and have a stick just puncture that leg, and then now you're squirting stuff away, and that tourniquet's going to be the only thing that you're going to have to keep fluids in you. Know how to use your first aid kit. Make sure everybody that you're traveling with knows how to use it. Make sure both vehicles have first aid kits that you're traveling with, because if one vehicle catches fire or takes a nap and rolls over on a trail or breaks down or whatever, and you have to leave them and you're separated, whatever, everybody should have first aid. You got to be your own, like I said, fire department, emergency first responder, tow truck, mechanic. You are your own little mobile village. So be prepared for that. But a lot of the confidence in knowing how to do this just comes with putting in some effort up front. Once you plan this trip the first time and kind of developed your lists for all these different categories and gone through your vehicle, that information is with you now. You've learned it, you've got it, you've got some Excel spreadsheets, because those are super fun. But you've got it, you've done the homework. So the first trip plan is always the hardest because it takes the most effort. But once you've done it once or twice, then it's basically just developing good habits and good discipline. And just, making sure if you get a little rusty on stuff like first aid and CPR, take a refresher, pull the kit out, play doctor with your significant other, and just know that you can, not the weird what kind, this is a family show here. But I'm serious though, everything's perishable skills. So just make sure you shake the rust off and, are well thought and planned. But I do recommend a good list, a good checklist. Nothing feels better than checking boxes on a checklist. I'm that kind of person. If you're not the checklist kind of person, do a checklist because it's going to help you. Especially if you're like the ADHD or whatever, force yourself to do a checklist. And if you keep bouncing around to 3 other checklists at the same time and just doing your ADHD thing, great. But just make sure you at least complete the checklist at some point and just be disciplined. So that is all I had tonight, though. Thank you guys for coming out. Appreciate you. Hopefully we'll see you out on the trail.